So we've alluded to Easter on lockdown, and everyone, sort of heading into the weekend. I guess all the leaders in Australia were concerned that people were going to, flout social distancing rules and et cetera, et cetera. Although it appears that at least on the eastern states, a bunch of fines were still handed out for people not doing the right thing. It seems by and large everyone sort of got the message and stayed indoors and didn't do anything untoward. But the net effect of that is that there's been some additional messaging that's come out now, in the sense that they're flattening the curve, I guess, perhaps better than expected in Australia, based on what the CMO has been saying, etc. Almost to the point that they may consider maybe some rudimentary relaxation of the restrictions that we're living under. So it's an interesting turnaround in just the last couple of weeks. And maybe it's an indication that it's just a fast-moving situation and no one really knows how it's going to play out.
Well, I think the important thing to remember is, in Australia anyway, not every state is the same. So South Australia has much more relaxed laws than the eastern states. So probably what you'll see is Sydney and Melbourne being relaxed to where South Australia is. So, and when I say we're relaxed, well, we're not much more relaxed, but we can still have get-togethers of under 10 people indoors. We can still have, if they're family, we can still have, people hanging out together as long as they're distanced. So it's not like everything's normal here in South Australia, but they are a little bit more relaxed. So, but, we can't have large groups outdoors even. So, but we would hope to see some of that at least, because I think it's been pretty severe.
So even when they're saying like the lessening up or loosening up of these restrictions, it's sort of, you still got to pour some cold water on it, because they're talking about in the context of doing things slowly.
That's right, and it won't mean reopening bars anytime in the next 6 weeks.
And the one that I wanted to touch on was travel as well. So this concept that, even just interstate travel might not be something that's on the horizon for till well later in the year, and international travel maybe even longer than that, because we have to get an understanding of how the rest of the world's going and what the risks are and whatnot. And there was a bit of messaging around that came out this week too, that, what was it? Look to. I hated that the term Australia First came up in the discussion, but because obviously that's got some parallel bad connotations from elsewhere. But the idea being that, look to Australia first to do your travels and trips, and I've been hearing a bit of that going on at the moment as well.
Yes, well, we'll see what happens out of that. I don't even think, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, we'll see when they allow interstate travel again. They need to control it inside Australia first, but I agree with you. I think there won't be any international travel for 6 months for sure.
Absolutely. Just in the second half now, and we touched on this a little bit about this idea of it ever being the same afterwards, etc. But the idea that there's actually some interesting potential effects in terms of behaviour, in terms of, and it kind of reminded me of something I think we discussed maybe in a previous episode a while back, about the focus on being local. So the idea that being in suburbia is going to be attractive to a lot of people, that the being in the local community might be something that's a bit more interesting, and compounding the fact that so many people are working from home now, if that becomes more of a viable option across the board, that it may decentralize the focus, I guess, on where we have to go and what we have to do in the daily lives of work, life, etc., etc.
Well, that's right. If this keeps going, the longer it keeps going, as we said right at the start, the more habits get broken, the more things change. And, anyone who can show they're productive from home now has a pretty good case in the future from maintaining that productivity from home. And I think we can all be a bit smarter, God, it's so much nicer having less traffic on the roads and more people on the streets. So I think that's a good thing.
There's another interesting little angle to it about transport, actually, that there might be concerns about going on public transport, at least in the initial stages when we're sort of buckling back into it and having to be surrounded by people, that there might be some solutions around people like using scooters more, bikes, and other alternative modes of transportation, especially because there was a discussion, I think, around scooters in particular about how they fit in, how they can I guess cities can be adjusted to accommodate that type of transport in the future, and so that, you know, there aren't accidents and whatever, which that could be another interesting little thing to see too, and see how that works.
Yeah, that's right. So I think these things will change us, and maybe, you know, like if you're catching a train for 5 or 6 Ks, well, scooters now, they easily have a 40K range. Maybe it's a much better option and cheaper too.
Absolutely. Another thing that was interesting was this idea about swinging away from density. So being I mean, we're effectively being told now that we have to, you know, go away from that because, you know, otherwise we might catch a virus. But that might be an interesting thing too, that, you know, house living versus apartment living, et cetera, going away from that sort of big city feel. I don't know if that necessarily will change, but it's been brought up as something that potentially might adjust some people's minds.
I don't think you can put that genie back in the bottle, but you never know, maybe. I think maybe it'll encourage more people to have another sea change or tree change again, but we'll have to wait and see on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, not going like, you know, people can always still have their apartment, and then if they really want the holiday house or something to escape from, I guess they can do that too. Do you think though, just as a general rule though, that this scenario could, you know, I mean, we've talked about things like transport, living the way you live, the, you know, things like how types of energy, you know, across the board, there's all these things that have been discussed about how things can be changed. Does this scenario that we're in right now potentially accelerate some of this stuff, or is it just...
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think, you know, change is change, and this is a big change for everyone. And I think that's the key to it. It's universal. This is happening around the world, you know. So I think this will have lasting change. I think it's changing social media usage, whatever that means, but that in itself goes to show you this is having an impact on people. I think the work from home is a big thing, and I think the whole transport and the idea of leisure time is also, you know, very powerful. So who knows? But you look at some of the artists now who are doing music online or theatre online. These are big changes, and maybe these are the sorts of changes that will stick.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we might wrap it up there. It'll be an interesting place to see where it all goes, and I'm not going to pull any predictions as to what state we'll be in by next week. My understanding from the announcements in Victoria anyway is that we're still going to be in sort of stage 3 restrictions until sort of mid-May, something like that, which seems to sort of make sense. And it will be interesting to see what the rhetoric is going forward, because if the rhetoric becomes more positive or not, depending on the types of outcomes that are coming out.
Well, that's right. And I think, you know, really at this stage, we need to watch the US purely because until they really start to get their numbers down, I don't think anything will change. So, you know, you've got to remember, I think, because this is a global thing, even if Australia gets to 0, and even if we relax some of our restrictions, we're not going to go back to normal until the last country goes back to normal. Now, I don't know what these staged restrictions would look like, and I don't even know what normal would look like anymore. But yeah, so we've got that's why they're saying 6 months. So it's at least 6 months until some sort of normal comes back.